what I'm trying to get people to understand throughout the industries is that this whole concept of game situational and game transfer is going to rely heavily on whether or not a player has good athletic transfer and skill transfer. Everything was always called skill development forever. And then what the problem was when I started really getting into skill enhancement, calling it everything the same name just didn't make any sense. It'd be like calling, all music under everything's just music, and you don't have genres like hip hop and R&B and rock and roll and alternative. So those genres help us identify the type of music you're going to hear, and we didn't have that for basketball training at all. So everything was like developmental training. You're a skill coach or not. And so the name of what we are is really important because it helps identify actually what kind of training they're going to get. And it also, hopefully over time, people won't fight over what's right and what's wrong. They'll be able to understand, just like a certain type of music isn't right or wrong, this is the type of training you're going to be experiencing. And so it becomes really important for us to be able to identify which kind of training is what, so we know whether or not we're fighting the right battles. And so most of the time when game situational trainers don't like what we do with skill enhancement, it's because they're trying to look at what we're doing through the exact same scope and lens. And so yeah, it wouldn't make any sense. If you're trying to look at what we're doing from a literal game situational perspective, it's not going to register. So that's when the whole gimmicky, props, all that type of stuff comes into people's head because they're trying to compare it to what they do. So it's really important that we separate that. The whole idea about this is what we talked about, is the whole idea of transfer. So everyone is always obsessed with game transfer, and so that would be right here. And the whole idea of game transfer, and I always make jokes that people with PhDs get really, really excited about game transfer and how to predict results. They would make the argument that on the game transfer side, everything is game situational. And so they would say you have to have game reads, you have to be able to work on the game read side of things, the rehearsal of those things, and you got to actually do the real thing in order to have game transfer. And in some ways, they're exactly right, but they're missing the other pieces. So then the other common one would be the strength and conditioning side, which we would say, what does that do for our game? That's athletic transfer, right? So I'm going to give myself the athleticism needed for the game of basketball. And for the most part, these two have lived in harmony now for a while. I'm pretty sure, though, right when this started, there was rifts, because this is actually relatively new. So, but there's at least an understanding now that this is now a part of the game and this is now a part of the game. But when someone's doing the strength and conditioning side of things, no one's ever saying, are you doing your plyo boxes with game reads? Are you doing your bench press in a game situational manner? Or otherwise it won't transfer, right? No one's worried about that because common sense says that the transfer of my athleticism is going to naturally help me in the game of basketball. And no one's going to say it's going to guarantee that you're going to be a great basketball player. There's really good athletes who they can do all the strength conditioning side. They still won't have great game transfer, but we can logically say this isn't going to hurt that. It can only help, right? So when I first started doing skill enhancement training, I tried to at times fit into the game situational side of things because I thought I had to, because that was the status quo. So I would make things game situational that didn't necessarily need to be game situational. I would try to imagine, like, okay, I need to turn this into a defender somehow, right? When I first realized that I didn't need to do that I shouldn't be doing that, is when skill enhancement really boomed, okay? And so what do we actually do? So on the skill enhancement side, then we're obviously filling the gap of skill transfer. What I'm trying to get people to understand throughout the industries is that this whole concept of game situational and game transfer is going to rely heavily on whether or not a player has good athletic transfer and skill transfer. I have examples of players who we've gotten extremely efficient on ball screens without ever doing ball screen reads, without ever taking them through those game situations, because they already did it. So game situational training is the most common form of training found in the game of basketball. You can find it with every coach, in every system, in every street corner. Someone's doing game situational training. So it just doesn't add up that the answer to them being better at the ball screen is by doing more ball screen reads. It doesn't add up that the answer to them being better in the ball screen is only by playing more games, when we live in a day and age where games is now more common than ever. So there's no shortage of games and no shortage of game situations. What's missing a lot of times is the skill transfer of their body positions, of how their footwork is operating and where their technique is at. And of course, you could also make arguments at times for athletic transfers. And so when we fill in the gap here, we finally bridge everything over so players can actually have more efficient game transfer. So hopefully over time, people start to understand that whatever one you want to say, we have hip hop, R&B, and alternative, whatever it is, right? But these are genres and they need to be separated. Defining skill enhancement then is typically saying skill enhancement is primarily non-situational. Skill enhancement is primarily not doing game reads. So we're purposefully taking things out of the context of those things. So let me give you an example. So we do things that we call color reads, right? You could call them cue reads. So something is cueing a read rather than the game. The game situational side will want to make those reads really specific. Defender does this, I do that, right? Defender does it this way, now that's your read. So they want to make everything very scripted in that way, kind of like the rehearsal. But when you're training someone, let's say I'm using dummy defense, which a lot of game situational training will use. So fake defenders, kind of leading you into those reactions, right? But the problem becomes then is the player, once they go kind of live with it, they're going to instinctively rely on what they already do. So they're going to just play based off of their own opinions and feels. And so I can do dummy defense all day long, but they're still going to kind of react towards what they already do already. So what I'm really doing is I'm bringing out their current basketball personality. But if I remove the context and I make it based off of colors, now they don't have their normal playing style to go off of. And so now I have red equals go this way, black equals go this way. Now I'm truly testing the skills of the reactions, not just their playing style that's already there. And so by removing the context of the game, I'm truly getting skill transfer now. And the game context can be inputted by a bunch of different variations and variables that we add in. So the more we can remove the context of the game at times and focus just on the skill transfer, the more it will naturally flow back into this side of basketball. And so it's been amazing the more we've removed the context of how much players have improved. I say all that to say this. None of this guarantees that someone's going to be a great basketball player. These guys can't even guarantee you're going to be a great basketball player, right? So there's a lot of confusion of game transfer, which is why all the PhDs are writing articles on this, because they don't know how to make it happen. So all I can really say is that you need all three to give a player the better chance. I like to say it this way to coaches: I'm not going to make you a better basketball player, but I'm for sure going to make you a more skilled basketball player, and our hope is that makes you a better basketball player. And so when you look at things like, okay, coaches will have this hang up. This player was really skilled, but they still weren't a good player, right? So they start to look at that and, oh, I'm just going to toss the training out the window. It's not working. But bad basketball players have always existed and will always exist. What we're doing then is, at least, at the very worst, making the bad basketball players at least skilled bad basketball players, which I'd still take over a bad basketball player with no skill. So the whole point now is, whether or not you're a good basketball player, a bad basketball player, an average basketball player, let's at least make you more skilled and more equipped, so hopefully you have better chances. So that's our role. So if you can focus on that, it's going to make your whole job a whole lot easier, because there's a lot of temptations to keep flowing back into here, and it will end up being a huge distraction to the skill transfer we're trying to give them.